Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden. And this is episode 19, Babes in Hololand. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news and then discussing Discovery Season 3, Episode 11, Su'Kal.
And then we'll get into our audience question right after our main story, Babes in Hololand, about using the holodeck as a coping mechanism and facing fear and grief in Star Trek. Come and join us.
So how speaking of Babes in Hololand reminds me of course, Babes in Toyland, which means Christmas movies, which we just had Christmas. So how were your holidays?
Christmas was good. I had a good Christmas. We got to hang out with the fam, who I'm been hanging out with since March.
Right?
How's yours?
Pretty much the same. Got to hang out with my family.
Yeah?
Yeah. It was cool.
That's
Ate
good.
some food. Listened to some Christmas music.
Eating food is good.
Eating food is always good. Kind of necessary.
It's interesting. I haven't listened to nearly as much Christmas music as I do most years because we haven't been driving around together in the car.
Mm-hmm. I made a point of, like, on YouTube, there are all these 7 and 8 hour videos of, like, a crackling fireplace with Christmas music playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a point of firing that up every morning when I got up. I would turn that on, turn the Christmas tree lights on. And so for like the past couple of weeks, it's felt very Christmassy around this house.
That's good. That's good. I always rely on my wife, on Melissa, for Christmas music because she plays it. She starts playing it like at the beginning of the season, like right after Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. Every time we're in the car together, which most years is a lot. And every time it's the radio, she has the radio stations and just whatever comes on the radio, the Christmas music, that's what we hear. And I did a little bit of that. I put the radio on the classical station quite a bit, and that had because I was not interested in listening to Last Christmas again. But yeah, because that's barely a Christmas song. Honestly, it just has the word Christmas in it, and it's not anyway. So, hey, a song that plays at Christmas is that song da 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 da. Christ was born for this. Christ was born for this. You know the song?
Maybe.
Anyway, there's this part that goes in there that they da 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 news. They add in that news. I don't know. Some hymnals do that and some don't. But hey, we have news. Huh?
Wow. That was one heck of a segue.
That was a terrible segue.
That was like awful. A beached whale kind of rolling around trying to get back into the ocean.
I was saying last week we should go for awkward transitions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's good. That's our new goal.
All right.
Hey, I hear you have some Star Trek news to share.
I do. Anyone who has tuned into the internet is probably aware that the ashes of James Doohan were smuggled out onto the International Space Station. Apparently, let's see, I'm reading this off of trekmovie.com, of course. They're reporting that the UK's The Times revealed that in 2008, entrepreneur Richard Garriott smuggled some of Doohan's ashes to the ISS on his 12-day mission as a private astronaut.
Which is cool, and it's weird because, I think at least 3 different people shared this piece of news with me in the past week. Hey, because people will send me Star Trek news, and it's funny because usually if one person sends me a piece of news, 1 or 2 other people will send it to me as well. And this one I've gotten at least 3 times, and it was weird because I thought this was already a thing that was known and that had happened and that was, I was like...
No, his ashes got spread in space.
Oh, okay. But this is a different thing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So cool. So it's another way that Jimmy Doohan's ashes got to space.
Quote, "It was completely clandestine. His family were very pleased that the ashes made it up there, but we were all disappointed we didn't get to talk about it publicly for so long. Now enough time has passed that we can," Garriott tells The Times. So yeah,
fascinating.
It's interesting. Go read the article.
Yeah, I want to know how enough time has passed to talk about a sneaky thing that you did that I mean, would you get in trouble for that? I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. Interesting. All right, cool. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Well, in the interest of my two pieces, I have two pieces of news. They're both in the interest of the fact that we are on the cusp of a new year. The first one is just a very brief thing. It's just a cool resource that you can find that the Trek Collective has on their website a 2021 Star Trek publication schedule. So that's pretty cool.
That does sound cool.
Yeah.
Now, is that like just book publications, or talking about shows publications, film publications, music?
This is books and comic books.
Oh, okay.
That are planned for 2021. There's some cool stuff.
Oh man, I need to pick up some more Star Trek comic books. I've got like two. One of which was a TOS and Uncanny X-Men crossover in the way that only a comic book can do. And the other one was an issue of TNG where the entire crew turned into Klingons. And I remember picking that up at a grocery store in Georgia when we were visiting some relatives out there.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's a crazy memory association. Anyways, that
nuts.
sounds cool.
Yeah, IDW has a lot of cool Star Trek comics coming out. I'm really behind on them, but there's some really good stuff out. I have some of them, but there's a lot of good stuff. But I've been distracted while you said that, because there's an ad on this website, on the Trek Collective, for some Discovery Pop figures.
Oh.
And I guess we can put a link to the Discovery Pop figure. I don't know how old this is. But the reason it was distracting is that the Saru Pop figure is one of the scariest things I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious. I'm going to have to go look at that now.
Because he not only has this weird looking face, because the Kelpian head does not translate well to the Pop figure.
Oh yes, I have seen this before. That is the thing of nightmares.
It is. And these piercing blue eyes. I just want to tell you, I mean, I'm just going to warn anybody. We're going to put the link down there, but I'm just going to warn people that this will keep you up tonight.
Can we change the podcast logo icon image to the Saru head?
No.
I might have to use this as an avatar in like Discord and stuff.
Oh man,
that is brilliant. I like Michael's.
Michael's cute.
Michael's is good.
But
yeah,
they've got to do. I don't know, but they've got to do several different Michaels because you got to have all our hairstyles.
Right. I love her hair this season.
Oh yeah.
The thing is, for me though, I've already got such a big collection of TNG, DS9, and Voyager. Were they Playmates?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Playmates. I've got such a big collection of those. I'm waiting for them to make characters that fit in that theme.
Oh right.
Because I've yet to see any, and it's making me sad.
Well, yeah, that's true. I don't know if they still have that contract.
Well, I don't know if they do either, but I mean, I'm just not necessarily Playmates,
cool,
but just figures that are in that line. Yeah, that sort of look.
That'd be cool. Yeah, which would really need to come from Playmates, I'm sure. But yeah, they had the exclusive for a lot of years. But anyway, all right. So what other Star Trek news do we have?
So, again from Trek Movie #NotSpawn, they are reporting that Jerry Ryan is reporting on Twitter that the production on Picard Season 2 has been pushed back to February 1st, specifically, of 2021.
All right. Which is not incredibly surprising.
No, not really.
And you know, I've actually been a little surprised that production has gone on, you know, the way it has. Mm-hmm. But, you know, people, you know, do safety measures and whatever, and so, you know, it works, I guess. So that's good. I want people to make Star Trek safely. So
yeah, absolutely.
and make it right too. You know, there are often creative reasons to do that. I don't know if she gave a reason really for delaying.
No, not according to the tweet. that.
So there could be creative reasons as well, which is another good
True.
reason to delay something. So, the entirety of Discovery was delayed for, I don't know, several months originally.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It got bumped.
Initial, yeah.
At the time, we were all like, oh my goodness, this is such a terrible thing. How can we wait so long for the new Star Trek? And now you're like, oh, that happened? I forgot. Like,
right.
Come on. Yeah. Perspective, right? So the last thing I'm going to put up there is not exactly news, honestly. This comes from, I've mentioned before, my buddy Neil Shirley and his newsletter, Star Trekking. And in the Star Trekking newsletter this week, there's a cool link to a jazzy version of the theme from The Inner Light by Jay Chataway.
Oh, cool.
The TNG episode, The Inner Light. And it's from a record that he did, actually. A whole record called Smooth Federation. Which is a jazz tribute to Star Trek.
Man, and the two jazz pieces on the Voyage Home soundtrack were a couple of my favorite pieces.
Oh yeah. But this is much like smoother jazz, much
Sure.
like loungier, jazzier. Yeah, it's
I'm
really
down with
cool, and it just sounds like good New Year's Eve kind of music.
Oh, cool.
And it'd be a great little soundtrack for your New Year's Eve party or whatever.
Yeah.
And this will actually come out in time for that. So hey, there you go.
What's it called again?
It's called Smooth Federation. Smooth Federation. It is by a fella called I've never heard of him before. So it's by a fellow called Andrew Allen.
Okay.
So it's a Star Trek jazz tribute. So I'll post The Inner Light down there, and then our listeners can explore from there.
Cool.
Pretty cool. Awesome.
So speaking of Picard, this is more of a rumor than news, but I've heard that they're looking to cast a younger Picard, presumably for like another series.
Really?
Yeah, now that's just pure rumor / conjecture, so take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But
well, Tom Hardy's still available.
yeah, is he old enough now to be as old as Patrick Stewart was when TNG was aired?
He might be. He might be. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So they could just reboot TNG.
Yeah.
Oh man, there you go,
Except
listeners. If they were to reboot TNG, who would you cast as the crew? With today's actors.
That's a good question. I like that.
We'll let you know in our next episode. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
Probably
if
not.
anybody actually answers us.
Right. So that's all I got.
All right, we got a lot of stuff. That was a lot of stuff.
It was fun.
All right, good. So hey, speaking of a lot of stuff, there's a lot of stuff to discuss in the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, season 3, episode. What is this? 11.
Episode 11.
Down to the end here.
Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted by Star Trek action figures now. I need to close these tabs.
Yeah, you do. You
okay.
Really do.
All right. I'm back on track.
Welcome back, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
All right.
So season 3, episode 11, Su'Kal. What did you think of it?
You know better than to ask me how I found
it. I almost did it.
Oh goodness. No, I enjoyed it. It was really good. I liked all of the stuff on the holodeck, and I'm excited. I've been wondering since they arrived in the future, when, like, even if Discovery has a holodeck on it, if part of the retrofit included a holodeck.
Right. Oh, hey, that's a good. Well, they have a cloaking device.
I know, like Whiskey Tango Foxtrot.
I know. That was pretty cool, man.
Yeah, I was taken back by that.
Yeah.
Did they come from? They came from a time had the cloaking the treaty that established the Federation couldn't build a cloaking device or couldn't develop one. Had that been established when Discovery initially takes place?
That I don't know for sure. I don't know. Was that with the Romulans?
Yes, that was the Treaty of Sharon.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna have to look it up.
I don't know. I'm really sketchy on early timelines, so I don't really know for sure. But yeah. So they certainly, I mean, even if you come from the 24th century, you still come from a time when the Federation doesn't have a cloaking device.
Treaty of Algeron prohibited the development or use of cloaking technology by the Federation.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's pretty cool that they get to have a cloaking device, and that was exciting to see. So we now
really cool.
have that. That's now a thing in Star Trek.
But then, we kind of had with the Defiant.
True. I don't know. I think it's exciting. It's going to be fun. I like that we're playing with so much technological advancement in this series, in this season of the series. Mm-hmm. Like the Tricom badge. When
I love those.
I love them. And when Stamets gets his little notification, he just turns it around and shows it to Saru. It just comes up on his little Tricom badge. He's like, here, there's a distress call coming from the Kelpian ship. So, what did you think of the premise of the episode? Like how it all played out, going to the planet and changing into other species and all that stuff.
So at first it was kind of cool, of course, to see, especially to see Doug Jones outside of the makeup.
Yes.
Beth was wondering if this is the first time Doug Jones has ever appeared as himself on screen.
It is not, but it's rare.
And his comment, "My heels are touching the ground."
Yes.
But
go ahead.
After when the program explained that they had changed their appearance to species that were members of the Federation and wouldn't disturb the kid, I'm like, but aren't there humans in the Federation as part of your program? Why do you need to change the humans away?
Yeah, he didn't say it was about being part of the Federation. He just said that your appearance was altered to fit within the parameters of the program or something like that, which I don't necessarily get. Honestly, I don't get the explanation, because you've got two humans and a Kelpian, and there are Kelpians in the program and there are humans in the program. So why the change? I really don't understand that, and it might be it might be a malfunction, honestly. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But I don't care because it's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. I definitely like it. I like the outfits that they were given. I feel like it was like the main purpose of that was to take away their tools.
True.
And so they were trying to come up with a reason why would this program take away their tools? Oh, I know, it's because they needed to change their appearance.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably it. That's a good way to see it. I think that's probably true. And it's one of those things too that there are lots of things like this in Star Trek where when you think about it for a little while, it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's too cool to not do.
Right.
Like when Saru talks about his heels touching the ground, like I'm thinking, well, if that's a holo effect, then would you actually feel that? Yeah. Like, does Saru even have heels? Because I always kind of assumed he just had hooves. Uh-huh. So I'm really just kind of like, I'm not sure. But it is what it is, and I feel like there's probably going to be some more payoff for it in the next episode, particularly with Saru. And but I loved seeing Doug. That excited me. There were a number of things that excited me about the episode. When Doug walked in and when they land, and they're not, anytime you beam down and you're not where you're supposed to be, and you don't look like you're supposed to look like or whatever, and something's wonky and something's sideways and weird, and we've got to figure it out. I really enjoy that. I loved that they were in this totally strange new world, kind of environment, to use a phrase I've heard a time or two, and I love the creatures flying in the air, reminded me of some. It was like, oh, this is what Star Trek looks like when we're doing in a live action series what we used to only be able to do in the animated series, because like in the animated series is where you see like really some of the few like flying aliens. and some of the few like really weird looking aliens.
Yeah.
And so from the Kelvin timeline forward is where we've really gotten some of these creatures, these CGI creatures and stuff that are really, really out there that we haven't been able to have before. And I really enjoyed that. I just love. It was good to see that it was good to see the condition. Well, it wasn't good. It was kind of disappointing to see that the set from Labyrinth is in such disrepair. It's I kept expecting David Bowie to show up, just flip up over the edge of one of the steps, but that didn't happen. That was disappointing. But yeah.
Yes, that was disappointing. I've wanted to do that little contact juggling like he does for so long.
Oh yeah.
That was just one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Well, those are not David Bowie's hands.
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
Yeah, it's a juggler called Michael Motion, and he actually played Thing in the Addams Family movie. Huh. And he was his hand. And he was really an amazing performer. And speaking of amazing performers,
that's fascinating and not at all relevant to our episode.
Not at all relevant to our episode, but it's an interesting transition. It's one of my favorite things about the episode, which is Sukal himself. I was watching this, and I guess you watched The Ready Room. Did you watch it?
I did not get around to watching it. No.
Okay. So, and this might not mean a lot to you at first, but I loved the performance, right? I loved the actor who played Sukal.
Okay.
Did you? I don't know. I was very impressed with them.
In what way? What did you like about him?
The ability to be so believably childlike. The emotional textures that were going on there, I just was immediately drawn in. I was like, "Oh, who is this? Who is this?" Because their performance is just so pitch perfect, and I really loved it. And then in the Ready Room, Doug Jones mentioned that part was played by Bill Irwin. I don't know if you know Bill Irwin.
Does not sound familiar.
Okay. Well, Bill Irwin is a guy, again, who like Doug Jones has admired for years and has admired Doug Jones for years. They kind of move in similar circles in terms of their performance. They're very like vaudevillian and mime background and everything.
Okay.
And you might have seen him as he had a small role in Popeye. That was one of the first places that I saw him. Man. He's in Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry Be Happy video. He's in a lot of different things. He's in Sister Act 2. He's in a lot of different things. But he's this really, really great performer. The thing that he's probably best known for, actually, is playing Mr. Noodle on Elmo's World. Which, he's the place that I first ran into him was in Muppet Magazine when I was a kid. There was a whole story on him in Muppet Magazine. He's just this really great comedic performer. He does a lot of like physical comedy, like Buster Keaton style stuff. And he's very popular with like mimes and magicians and clowns, which is people that I've grown up around. And so I was very attuned to, to Bill Irwin. I just know him. I've seen him around for years, and so when Doug Jones said it was Bill Irwin, I was just like, yes, of course, because I felt like he matched Doug Jones's style of energy. Even though he's playing a completely different kind of character, I could feel this synergy between him and Doug Jones as performers, and that clicked for me. I was like, yes, there you go. They have that same type of background and that same type of thing. This is the first thing I've seen him do. He's done a lot of things that I haven't seen, but this is the first thing I've seen him do this dramatic. Okay. And just his whole texture and everything. It was just beautiful, and it's exciting to see. And he's 70 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? That's Bill Irwin. I mean, he just is ageless and just knows how to do that type of performing.
Wow.
Yeah, 70 years old, and he's fantastic. So, I'm a huge fan, and yeah, it's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, but so let's talk about Su'Kal. Let's talk about the premise of the episode.
Sure.
That this is the origin of the burn.
Mm-hmm. A planet made of dilithium.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And his grief he was tied in, like his DNA was altered in utero.
Yeah. And
then when his mom died, he went and destroyed the Federation and every other.
It's interesting that you make that connection because they never do that in the episode.
They never do what? Oh, they don't make the connection?
Well, the episode never says specifically. They're wondering what the inciting incident was. But they never say it.
Are you sure? I could have sworn they had.
Nope, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Did you watch it again?
I watched it twice, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And I'm because that was what I assumed.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably right. That it's the grief at the loss of his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is this thing that he's avoiding? What is this monster that he's trying to keep locked away?
It looks a lot, by the way, side note. It kind of reminded me, like the first thing I thought of when I saw it was the, I can't pronounce it right, the baul.
Oh, yeah.
The other species on...
Kaminar.
I started to say Keldor. I'm like, that's not right. That's Star Wars.
Right. See, there you go. Mixing the franchises again.
Veering off cross-universe again.
Well, actually, I think there's some semblance there. But I don't... To me, I think it looks like a Kelpian. If you notice, like, the head... Mm-hmm. Like these flaps come up in the middle. There's this big flap that comes up, and on the sides, and it corresponds with where you can see grooves in a Kelpian head.
Sure.
And I really feel like and from the illustration in the book too, I really feel like it's some kind of riff on the Kelpian biology.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a kind of a fan theory that the monster is not only going to turn out to be his grief over the loss of his mother, but in some way will actually be his mother. I think it is a Kelpian, and I think it's not trying to attack him, and it's not trying to harm anybody, but it wants connection in some fashion. Okay. There's a moment when after Saru sings the lullaby and Su'Kal calms down, there's this moment with the monster where it's kind of looking over its shoulder, and there's this detectable sadness, grief on the monster's face, and in its expression and posture, and it kind of slinks away, and I think it's either some part of Su'Kal or actually his mother in some way trying to remerge or reconnect with him. I think that's what it's going to be.
Okay. That'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. But this episode is also the debut of Captain Tilly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was pretty flipping great.
Her sassing the Orion, which, by the way, I am still not impressed with. She just... she disappoints me as a villain. I'm like... There's so much more potential to really be a menacing villain here, and she's just kind of petty.
I liked her more this episode than I've liked her in the previous episodes.
That's fair.
I do think a lot of what's playing against the actor is the makeup. Because I've talked about how I thought it was a prosthetic.
Yeah,
And
that's fair.
in the ready room this week, the actor who plays Osira confirmed that is the case. It's a
really?
Yeah, it's a full head.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
why?
which I think it's to keep from having to paint and repaint the actor's skin.
Okay.
But it has the effect of sort of freezing the face a bit.
Yeah.
And I think that inhibits the performance.
Agreed.
And so that to me is, I mean, it's amazing. And I think we get a closer look at the makeup in this episode than we have before. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I feel like this particular makeup looks better closer up. The more we get a close-up view of it, the more alive it looks. And the farther away we get from it, the less alive it looks. That's not.
And then when you distort it on the hologram talking, doesn't do it any favors.
Yeah, it looks a little weird. And it's the opposite of what you normally have with prosthetics.
Yeah,
you know, right. A lot of times when
Spots
you get
ears.
like in the old days, you get closer to the prosthetic and you're more likely to see the seams and all that. But of course now we're doing these feather edges with silicone and stuff, and you don't see that stuff as much, not anywhere near as much. We're in this new realm. But the other thing that it does to the actor's face, I don't know if you noticed. Was there anybody who Osira looked like to you visually at any point in this film, in this episode?
Who she looked like visually?
Did she remind you of anybody?
Now that you mention it, kind of.
Who?
I can almost picture, like every time it starts to form in my head, it slips away.
It's not quite there. Let me see if you. So there's a particular moment. It's all throughout the episode, but I noticed it especially in this particular moment when Tilly says, "This isn't over," and then you cut to Osira and she's like, "Oh, I think it is," or "Oh, yes, it is," something like that. Watch that moment. She looks exactly like Margot Kidder.
Yeah.
Exactly like Margot Kidder. It's crazy. And the thing is, there's a good reason for that, because Osira is played by Janet Kidder, who is Margot Kidder's niece.
Oh, okay.
And
you gotta be kidding me.
No, and she looks in real life. Oh,
I love the delayed reaction.
It's one of those joke grenades, you throw it and then wait 10 seconds. Yeah. That's good. That was good. That was fast. That was good. No, she's Margot Kidder's niece, and she doesn't look as much like Margot Kidder without her makeup on. But when she's in the Osira makeup, she has these moments, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, she looks just like Margot Kidder."
Yep.
It's crazy. And it's weird because like her upper lip doesn't move in this makeup. And Margot, especially if you watch as she gets older in the Superman, especially in Superman 4, her upper lip just does not move at all. And it's so weird.
Wow.
Because Janet Kidder's does, but when she's in this makeup, it doesn't. And I guess maybe it's the lip, it's the forehead, it's the eyebrow ridge, whatever. She looks just like Margot. It's really weird. It's spooky. Yeah, but it was really cool. But I liked her performance a lot better. I liked the character a lot better in this episode than I have in others in the past. But yeah, I can understand that she feels a little lackluster, I guess.
Yeah.
But I feel like when she's sparring with Tilly, I feel like that was really cool. I really liked that. Of course, I guess because I'm loving what it brings out in Tilly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said in the Mirror episodes that Mary Wiseman can't play evil, but she can play tough.
I loved it when she was all like, "Because I will blow this ship up, I will self-destruct this ship," and Owo and Detmer kind of look at each other like, "Wait, is she serious?"
Yes, it's great. She says, "I will self-destruct the ship," and Owo was like, "You will what now?"
Yeah, that was good.
It was pretty great. Yep. And of course, it's sad because she doesn't get the opportunity to kind of make good on her.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, not to blow up the ship, but at least to make good on
yeah,
her.
I hate it. Like, I hate it in a good way, I guess, but I hate it when the villain just kind of slaps down the heroes like they're just a little fly.
Yes.
After all that back and forth, and then they were just like, "Oh, slap you down." It's so humiliating.
Yes, it is. It is. But it's going to be all the better in the next episode when we get the ship back. We assume.
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of hoping that Tilly would have been able to give up more of a fight.
Yeah.
A better showing, not just a verbal sparring, but give the ship a run for its money. Or something.
Yep, that would have been cool. I was looking forward to that. But, that's the thing about these takeovers. It's like, our people don't walk around armed or anything.
Yeah.
So when you come in and surprise us, we kind of like, oops, we're stuck now because we're instantly outgunned. And it's kind of over. So that's always been a weakness. But that happens. And that's the thing. Like, it's one of those things that happens. A lot of the stuff that happens in this episode happens in Star Trek. Is things that we do in Star Trek. We beam down to a planet and things are sideways. We have the ship taken over by the villain or whatever. Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It happens in Star Trek a lot. And it's there's been more and more of that done, particularly this season. I mean, throughout the series. But particularly this season, there's been more and more of that done where Discovery is doing some of the Star Trek things that Star Trek does. And every series has to have their episode where this thing happens. And so now it's happening. And it's cool to see it in a new context, in a new way. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, this is the broken holodeck episode for Discovery.
Right. Except, well,
not broken, but holodeck shenanigans.
Yeah. Which I found really interesting and I really enjoyed because I feel like it took the idea of what can happen in a holo environment and how bizarre a holo environment can be or how unusual it can be and really heightened that, really ran with it.
Death Eaters. The little flying things. That's who they reminded me of. Death Eaters from Harry Potter.
Yes. The monster does look like a Death Eater. Very true. A Kelpian Death Eater.
There we go.
But a Death Eater nonetheless, right? Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. And if I mean, it's I really think there's going to be something to that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to the Kelpian appearance of it, and I loved that. The elder.
Yeah.
The elder was played by the actor who played Saru's father in The Brightest Star.
Oh,
from
that's
Short
cool.
Treks. Yeah. So that was really cool to see him come back. Mm-hmm. And
I loved the because the comment or his age as we were watching it, and Saru was talking about the village elder passing on the stories and everything, and Beth was like, "Don't they get culled though?" And then like 2 seconds after she says that, Saru's like, "But I've never seen one this old before."
Right. Exactly. Well, and I love the way he approaches him too.
Mm-hmm.
Because he says honored elder, and I love that. I just think it's really important to see that attitude toward older people, because so often in our culture, well, at least in our country, so often old people are kind of laughed at or pushed aside or thought of as inconveniences, and not really given the respect and the dignity that they are due, I think, a lot of times. And, the TNG episode Relics, I think, went into that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's an important biblical concept too. The idea of respecting and not respecting your elders, in the way you normally think about it, do what I say, boy. Right. Respect your elders, but but more of that that honor. He says honored elder, and respecting who they are and where they come from, and the passing down of the stories, which I find to be really, really important. My favorite band, Iona, has a song called "The River Flows," and it's based on it's in an album that's based on the Book of Kells, the old illuminated manuscript from the Celtic Christians, ancient Celtic Christians, and the idea is it says down through the ages the truth will survive, turning the pages the light cannot die, and the river flows is about the idea that the truth of God's story, if you will, the truth of our relationship to God, the truth of the gospel, whatever, that river continues to flow as it's passed down. And I thought about that as I was watching the elder turn the pages in that illuminated manuscript, that he had there, that he was reading from, which is, it's interesting because it's kind of like a children's book, right? But it's also for adults. And I liked that. I liked the heritage of ideas, like essential ideas, important ideas that we hand down from generation to generation, and how incumbent it is upon us in our current context, as so many of us sort of question and or move away from some of the structures that we have trusted to hold on to those things in the past, that we carry those important ideas with us and translate them well. I think it's really important that we do that and really focus on that. And honoring our elders is a good way to do that, and finding new ways to share those stories and new ways to preserve those things, I think, is really important. That's a really a side note there, but it was something that stood out to me as I was watching, at least that, those scenes with the elder.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know how much we want to go into this, but it goes both ways too, though. There's, in that passage in the Bible, it talks about honoring your elders. It also advises elders to listen to the wisdom of the young, and to not frustrate them.
Well, yeah, and
I think that a lot of the reasons some young people give elders that don't give them that respect is because they expect the respect in the way that you mentioned, like, I'm your elder, do what I say, boy, sort of the thing. Right. So it goes both ways. It
does, and that's another important thing in what I mentioned earlier, the TNG episode Relics, that it's about ageism in general. Ageism can go both ways. I think one of the things you might be thinking of is when Paul tells Timothy, let no one look down on you because of your youth, but instead be an example for them in speech, life, and love, and faith, and purity. And that, it goes both ways, and but in all
because
things,
it's really hard not to get political here, because it's so in the discourse about how much young people are struggling right now because of the decisions that the old people have made and are deriding young people for having to deal with.
Right.
I see so much of that now, and maybe it's an echo chamber for me. I don't know. I see so much of that. It's really, really difficult to. I struggle with that. Honor your elders sometimes.
Well, and that's true, and I think that's true in every generation in one form or another. And so I think in so many ways, because humanity's always broken. And humanity is always falling short, and there are always things that are problems and that are getting in our way. But it's always about being the active party, being the party who is actively looking for the opportunity to do the right thing, and to do the next right thing, and to do the next right thing. Sort of one step at a time, and. So when the scriptures are talking about honoring your elders, or honoring those who come before you, and you have to think about how to do that. Like, okay, maybe you disagree with somebody, or maybe there are mistakes that the previous generation made, and you're reaping the fallout of those mistakes. are
Sins
you
of the father.
Yeah. Are you going to hold that against them, or are you going to look for look for the redeemable, look for the things that you can, because it's so easy to get caught up in, because just like there are things that the younger generation does that prove ignorance or entitlement or any number of things, right? But we need people who are older who are going to look at younger people and see the good things in them and encourage the good things in them. And I think it's true in all kinds of places in culture where we're different from one another, right? Whether it's because of political views or race or religion or culture or any kind of thing that keeps us apart from one another. It can be really difficult sometimes to see those things that are beneficial in the other person, that the other person brings, that are not going to be points of conflict, that they're going to bring wisdom. Everybody has those things that are failings, but everybody has those things that are good too, potential and wisdom. All that
You're
stuff.
absolutely right, and that is very important to remember. I think what gets me though is when the elders start to deride the younger generation because the younger generation is struggling over things that the elder generation caused.
Right. And I mean, but then you have to ask yourself the question, how am I going to respond to that? Am I going to respond to that with accusation, or am I going to respond to that with grace?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that's an important question to ask.
You know? And I think the like the Christian call is to grace, to forgiveness, to mercy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, forgiveness has always been a really great definition that I go by quite a bit. Forgiveness is just surrendering the right to hurt someone for hurting you. It doesn't mean there aren't consequences. It doesn't mean you have to put yourself back in that place to be hurt again. It just means surrendering the right to hurt someone. And I think that's how I try to take it. I may not always succeed personally, but
that's very good. It's the opposite of vengeance.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know me, I like to be about the Lord's business.
That's nice. But yeah, no, and that's really true. That's really true. And I know it's not necessarily a theme of this episode.
Yeah, we've kind of gone way off into left field.
We went a little far afield, but still, it is something that the episode brings to my mind anyway.
Uh-huh.
And another thing, too, that kind of goes on this theme of our heritage that we have from those who come before, that caught my attention in the episode was the metal burr under the arm of the chair.
Oh yes. Uh-huh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Philippa, prime Philippa, passing that down to Michael, and Michael passing that on to to Tilly, to Tilly, mm-hmm. and that, for me, that idea of that tactile contact with something, that tactile contact with an idea, like that's what a ritual is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's why we reach out to relics so much.
Mm-hmm. You mean the episode or actual relics?
Actual relics.
Okay, sorry, we were talking about the episode earlier.
Yeah.
I had to make sure. Yeah, no, you're right, and I know you also come from an archaeological point of view too. Mm-hmm. But I think, I couldn't help but think of like a rosary, right? Or something else. There are in Buddhist temples, there are these things that you spin, mm-hmm. on these, I don't know, I've forgotten what they're called, but you spin them, and every time it spins, it's a prayer, and just things like that are tactile, mm-hmm. and that engage our senses. I think can help to, like Michael's talking about, that it helps to ground us, helps to focus us on where we are and what we are doing. right? Mindfulness of our moment that we're in, and paying attention to where our hearts are, where our minds are, where our emotions are, and where our bodies are, and putting all those things together into a sense of presence, I think is really important. That's what communion is about. That's what kneeling at prayer is about. Any physical thing that we do, and finding those things, in our post-evangelical context, when we may not be in churches, or we may not be even in contexts that we grew up in terms of worship or prayer, finding those again and cultivating those again, and finding ways to reconnect with that can be really important for us.
Yeah, the most meaningful Good Friday experience I've ever had. At the end of the service, they had taken, it was a little odd for a service. I think it was run by the youth. So it wasn't like your traditional sort of service, but they had taken the cross down, and there were a couple of nails on the sides, and they invited everyone to come up and walk around the cross and actually touch the nails. And I think some people, like, they let you hammer in nails into the cross to sort of symbolize our sins being taken by Jesus. And it was a profound, the whole act of doing that, the touching, the feeling, the sensations, it was a very profound experience.
And I think that's something we often lose in a Protestant context. I think Protestants are less attuned to that kind of activity. And in general,
you got the hand wavers.
Well, that's true. That's true. And that's part of where that style of worship comes from too. The engagement of the body, finding a way to engage yourself physically in something, in anything that is that requires focus, concentration, or devotion, and in those spiritual acts, to not see the spiritual and the physical as divorced from one another, but intimately integrated with one another. I think that's very important. And I think that's what we just came through the Advent season, right? That's what the incarnation is. It's a spiritual reality expressed in a fleshly being. And that's what being the church is continuing the incarnation, is being the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. So, yeah. So those kinds of rituals, those kinds of things can be very helpful to us. So I encourage people to seek them out. Remember Tilly's little bump on the on the arm of the captain's chair.
Remember Tilly's little bump.
Yeah. So the heart of this episode, though, we've gone all kinds of places. It's been a little scattered.
You can say that again.
But the heart of this episode, of course, is Sukal, the namesake of the episode, and his relationship with the holo environment. And so you came up with our title this week, and I think kind of we're giving structure to this idea about how, like, looking at Sukal's relationship to his holo environment, and then going back and contextualizing it in Star Trek's history of holo environments and how we deal with fears and griefs through them. So let's talk a little bit about some of the ideas we have in that realm.
Let's do that.
Yeah. So where do we want to begin?
I don't know. I guess either with Barclay or with the bonding.
Yeah. So it was interesting to me that we both pinged on the bonding.
Right.
And should I go ahead and tell the story?
What story?
The Ron Moore story behind
the.
Go ahead.
I think the reason we both pinged on the bonding is because of the parentalness of the similarities, right?
Yeah, perhaps so. I mean, it is a young boy dealing with the loss of his mother.
Right.
For those of you who may not remember, it's a TNG episode where an officer is killed on the Enterprise, and she leaves behind a son, and he has this encounter with this alien being, the alien who killed his mother, actually, didn't mean to, I think, as I recall, wants to create this environment where his mother is still around to keep him from having to go through grief, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And Worf is instrumental in pulling him away. Again, through ritual, we keep coming back to ritual and religion, but again, through involving him in Klingon rituals of mourning.
Yeah, apparently he made him a brother in his house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then
that
we never
was
see
never
him
touched
again.
on again. Yeah,
But
the good old days of
yeah,
80s and 90s television.
right. But it's interesting that you say that. I mean, but for me, like, it wasn't so much that as much as it was about processing grief, because my hypothesis about the Discovery episode has to do with this is really about processing grief.
Right.
And, there's this famous story. I mean, I love the bonding as a moment in Star Trek history, because I feel like it's a moment where Star Trek grew, or at least was defended against regression. This was the first episode that Ron Moore wrote, full episode that Ron Moore wrote for Next Generation. And Mike Piller was, of course, the head writer at the time. And they had given this script to Gene about this boy and about his need to process the grief of the death of his mother in order to move forward. That the whole idea that he needs to believe that his mother's still alive so that he doesn't have these, air quotes, negative emotions of grief, that this was a bad thing, and that to move forward and to move on with his life, he needed to be able to grieve his mother. Mm-hmm. And Gene came back and said, nope, in the 24th century, we're advanced beyond that. We've evolved beyond grief because death is just seen as a part of life, and nobody really grieves anymore. And yeah, that was the thing. And this is the thing where, again, people just sort of idealize Gene, and he had his faults, and one of his faults was sort of believing his own philosophy a little too much, where it got to be over applied, and it got to be, and I think Ron was just kind of like, well, I'm a young writer, and this is Gene flipping Roddenberry, so I guess this isn't happening. And but Mike Piller really went to bat for him, apropos of Mike Piller's love of baseball, which is what got him onto Next Generation. But we'll move on with that story another time. But Mike went in and talked to Gene, and defended this story, and because we don't know exactly what he said to Gene, but the upshot of it is that Gene's idea of evolution or advancement at that moment was really moving us beyond something that was truly recognizably human, that really doesn't apply to people, that people can't relate to, right? It's this idea of being sort of beyond things that make us human. And what I love about that is that the fact that this episode got made means that in whatever roundabout ego-stroking way he did it, Mike Piller and Ron and by extension Ron Moore were able to sort of tell Gene Roddenberry that there needs to be room for grief, there needs to be room for struggle, there needs to be room for conflict, and within this supposedly idealized human future. Mm-hmm. And that right there is the shift that started happening even during Gene's life, but of course after he died and after we moved on into Deep Space Nine with Ira Behr and Mike Piller.
Right.
And that has helped, I think, to keep Star Trek alive, because that's so important to our context. But I think we do the same thing as Christians that Gene Roddenberry did with Star Trek, which is idealize things so much that we begin to truncate our own humanity, to deprive ourselves of our own humanity, not give ourselves permission to be fully human, even as we follow a savior, a Messiah, who is described as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Jesus did not engage in a salvific act by running away from pain or struggle or sorrow, but by embracing it, and even unto death, embracing pain. And I think that's a sacred thing, because pain is part of life. We have to have it. It's part of
I
existence.
like my pain. I need my pain.
There we go. Back to that theme. So for me, yeah, that's where I came from in the bonding. I wasn't thinking about the sort of holodeck sort of nature of it.
Okay.
The illusory sort of nature, but it's also there. But that need to engage. So, what does that tell us about this overall theme?
Well, I think it speaks to our need to kind of create alternative realities where we can explore our mental states and our thought processes. And I mean, yeah, sometimes we hide away too much in there, a la Barclay, but there's a very human part of us, and there's that tie to our creator, our tendency to create. And so we create these spaces that we have control over. I think there's definitely an element of control there, like you saw with Sukal. When things started to get uncomfortable with Michael's questioning, he reset the program.
Right. Computer reset program, exactly.
So yeah, there's an element of control there, of a safe space to process at our own pace.
Yes. Well, and we talked about that a bit also with It's Only a Paper Moon, when we did the Eisenberg class episode. And, there's a place for it. And I think you mentioned Barclay in TNG.
Yeah.
I think Barclay's story is very much where he has developed an addiction. He's developed an over-reliance upon something that is intended to be therapeutic in some way, right?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with having an escape. There's nothing wrong with having a place to process. I mean, even watching Star Trek itself.
Yeah.
That can be something that we do that, it's all escape, or it can be something that we do that we can think deeply about what we're watching and apply it to our lives and become better humans because of it.
Right. And it's like one of the things that early on in my therapy sessions, my therapist was trying to get across to me is that anything we do is an attempt to meet a need. We can choose something poorly, or we can choose something wisely. We can overindulge, or we can use just the right amount, but it's all an attempt to meet a need, whether that need is sustenance or affirmation or what. It's all an attempt to meet a need. And I think recognizing that is the first step to self-acceptance, self-love, self-forgiveness.
And that then is a step toward love and acceptance and forgiveness for other people. I think it's really instructive that Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself, because the implication there is that you love yourself to begin with,
right?
And I think it's in that our sort of relationship with ourselves, if you will, that we begin to sort of practice the things, that we can start to practice the things that we need to apply to others, and it can work the other way too. Sometimes, you talk about how you talk to yourself in your head and the things that you say to yourself in your head. And it's like, would you say that to another person?
Right.
Would you talk to your friend that way? Would you talk to your spouse that way? Like, yeah, no, I wouldn't. I'd never say that to someone else. And yet I readily say it to myself. But the point is that self, loving ourselves, caring for ourselves, and having and being kind to ourselves, again, can help us be kind to others. Can help us to see things in others that to which we can relate, and recognize that, like you said, I love that everything is an attempt to meet a need. And the question is, what need are we attempting to meet? Even if somebody is being hurtful to you, even if somebody is doing things they shouldn't do and either harming themselves or harming others, the question is, what need are they trying to meet?
Right.
And what's the legitimacy there? What's the legitimate need that that person has? Because we can label them however we want to label them, and we can talk about their behavior however we want to talk about it. But the question is, what need are they trying to meet, and how can we get to the root of the problem rather than just like saying, okay, you're doing something wrong, therefore I'm going to impose this consequence on you, right? But rather, why are you doing that wrong thing, and how do we address what's causing you to do that wrong thing so it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I think that's the the core difference between punitive justice and restorative justice, or
Absolutely.
penal systems and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree with that. And that punitive justice or retributive justice, right? As opposed to, and like you said, that forgiveness is letting go of, how did you put it? The right to
hurt someone for hurting you.
Right. Which is that vengeance. Even when you go to the animated series episode Bem, which is one of my favorites, there's I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Sadly, no.
Okay, so in the animated series, I highly recommend it. There are several episodes, a couple of 3 episodes of the animated series that are among my favorite episodes of Star Trek. One of them is Bem, written by David Gerrold, but there's this god figure, voiced by Nichelle Nichols, by the way, which is just beautiful.
Oh,
but there's
nice.
this god figure on this planet, and so there's this exchange between the character Bem and the god entity, right? And Bem says, "You do not demand punishment?" And the god entity replies, "Punishment? What is punishment? Revenge? Intelligent beings need no revenge. Punishment is necessary only where learning cannot occur without it. You are beyond that." So the idea behind that line is, I think, very much a biblical idea. It comes from Jesus, actually, in the Gospel of John. He says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment." So there's that. We've talked before about fear and love as kind of these two ways of viewing the world, 2 ways of encountering the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think a lot of what happens when something like these holodeck experiences that we're talking about, these escape experiences, these stories we tell or environments we create or whatever, try to help us process things, when that becomes a problem is when it starts to be a function of fear, where we'd rather stay in the false thing than engage with the real thing. But love, it says, drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And so when we talk about like retributive justice, punitive justice, right, or punishment, right, that's a very, I feel like it's a very external way of dealing with things. That's behavior modification.
Right.
And it generally tends to function on fear. Like if you don't want, this XYZ consequence, then don't do this XYZ thing.
If you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Right, exactly. And then there's that question of whether our the punishment fits the crime and all that sort of thing, and whether by enacting this retributive justice we're actually causing more harm and perpetuating more wrongdoing.
Right.
So when we find ourselves acting in fear, right, either using fear as a tool against others or using fear as something that motivates us in what we're doing right now, I think that's where we can say we're in an unhealthy place.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really true. But the thing is, too, it's like, what is restorative to us in this moment when we're trying to process something in our lives that may be difficult, that may be painful, that may be hurtful? We don't deal with the root of an issue, right, by just dealing with the external behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way we don't deal with the darker things in life by trying to make them go away, like the bonding, or like this Discovery episode, Sukal. We don't deal with things by just trying to make them go away. And yet I think our religious structures today often do try to gloss over the struggles, do try to gloss over the harder parts of life, sort of pay lip service to the harder stuff. But
thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Well, but more than that, just the sense like in Christian music and stuff, like there's just, it's very positive and very affirmational, and might sort of mention in passing, that sometimes things get bad,
Right.
But then we just kind of go on with it. Whereas the scriptures themselves, you think of the Psalms, you think of Lamentations, there are these crying out to God, pouring out your heart like a drink offering to God. And wrestling with God and expressing. There are things that the psalmist expresses that are frightening about what they'd like to do to their enemies.
Exactly, yeah.
And their enemies' children. And you just go, whoa, all right. Dial it back. But the idea that it's okay, even within the scripture, to process those things, to let those feelings out. There's nothing that you can say or think that's going to surprise God. And sometimes just saying that you're going through something, and again, we've talked about confession, just talking about that to someone, that you're going through something, can be a healing act. And, sometimes something that you do to escape or to process the way we see in these holodeck episodes, it goes different ways, right? I mean, in the bonding, it's like, don't go to the holodeck. Don't. Well, it's not a holodeck, but don't buy into the illusion at all. Right. But in fact, engage in something that is real and physical to help you process your emotions. In It's Only a Paper Moon, he has to go through the process of being in the holosuite long enough to start to gain confidence in himself and to start to have the strength he needs to be able to face the pain. He needs to kind of retreat for a while to be able to walk on his own 2 feet, quite literally, to stop, to be able to process what he's gone through. And then you have with Barclay, it's like, no, dude, you are way too sucked into the holodeck. You've come to rely on this as a way of sort of catharsis, but you're not actually dealing with your actual life or changing anything in your actual life. Just anything that you confront in your life, you just take it inside, hold on to it, and then go express it in the holosuite instead of doing something about it in real life. And it's locking you up in your existence. Right. So there are these different ways in which people deal with things that are on a sliding scale of healthy interaction, and so I think those are very instructive to look at, and one way or another, you have to be able to confront and work through whatever it is. You have to be able to actually work through it and actually have active. And sometimes it's as simple as just sharing it with somebody else.
Yeah, it's like that quote that you're so fond of saying. I actually shared it with my therapist. Anything mentionable is manageable.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I find that true. I've been relying on that myself. And when something's starting to get to me, I can recognize that inner critic, and then I identify it or a trigger that's gotten to me. I can identify it, say what it is, even if all it is telling Beth, hey, I just realized I've been, this kind of triggered me and I'm having this kind of reaction to it. That is so much help towards coping with it. And, these holodecks, they're a good way to see that, getting into a good book where you can identify with the struggles There was a Brandon Sanderson novel I was reading out in my car one day at lunch, and I can't remember what one of the characters said to the other, but I read it and I'm just like, wow, that's what I needed to hear. And I broke down in tears right there in my car. It was just such a cathartic moment, such a release that allowed me then to cope and heal and begin to move on from it.
And that makes me think so much about, what I say so often around here, what I say so often is in my life, and it's kind of something I've hung on to for so long, is that all goodness is God's goodness, all truth is God's truth, and all beauty is God's beauty. So that reading a novel becomes a sacred act. Writing a novel becomes a sacred act, because the goodness and the truth and the beauty that you needed came in that form where you weren't even looking for it. I think that's a beautiful moment, because it just means that in a very real sense, I feel like, it's like God speaks to you through a novel that you're reading. Because when that truth comes to you, when that goodness comes to you, when that beauty comes to you, that's the goodness, truth, and beauty of God. That's a divine act. That's a holy thing that happens. So we should recognize it as such and acknowledge that. But you're right. I mean, we don't have holodecks, but we have movies and TV. We have Star Trek. We have video games. We have we have books. We have music. We have lots of things that we immerse ourselves in. But the question is, what are we doing with that immersion? How are we engaging in it? What's going on in our hearts during that time? And are we truly confessing those things that are struggles for us?
So we've got a question here from a listener. I guess going off of the theories, a lot of the fan theories were, before we learned that Carl was a guardian of forever, there were some theories thinking that he was a Q. So the question comes, do you think Discovery has a place for Q? I guess in terms of, his characterization, and he was always kind of a little sillier, a little lighter. Do you think the way his character is, or a Q of any kind, do we think they'd have a place in Discovery?
Well, Q can have a place any place he chooses to. I wouldn't want to argue with him about that.
Right. I don't know. The way Discovery's kind of telling their stories right now, Q would just feel out of place. At least the old John Delancey Q. Yeah.
But, I don't know about that, because I think back to Rainn Wilson's rendition of Harry Mudd.
Yeah.
In Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad.
My wife cannot stand him. We couldn't watch
really?
the short because he acts the character so loathsome so well that she wouldn't watch the short.
Oh, I see. Because he's a good Harry Mudd, not because he's a bad one. Yeah. Oh, he's wonderful. I absolutely love him in that role. But I think about that where it's kind of Harry Mudd is a little bit of a whimsical or comical character, and yet, Wilson gives him some depth and dimension that he might not otherwise have in Discovery. And I can see something along those lines being done in Discovery. But the other thing is that one of the reasons Q is the way he is and works the way he works is that he does come in as so antithetical to the way things normally function in Star Trek. But maybe there is that quality of pure whimsy that might be difficult to work in to Discovery. I don't know.
Would you want to see, if they did try and work in a Q, would you want to see John Delancey again, or would you want to see someone take a different take on it, like with Mudd?
Boy, both options are attractive to me. Because anytime I get to see John Delancey, I'm happy.
Yes. No argument there.
That's definitely something I'd want to do. But it'd also be cool to see what someone else could do,
Yeah.
Like Bill Irwin.
You know what I kind of want to see?
What?
Just since they've already introduced all this time traveling, hopping around stuff, I kind of want to see Traveler Wesley Crusher.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool?
That would be such a treat.
Except I think Will Wheaton's acting style might not be at home
Yeah,
in
that's
Discovery.
fair.
But I don't know. I haven't seen him actually act in a long time.
Shots fired.
No. I mean, in recent years.
In a long time.
In
okay,
recent
in a
years.
long time. Right.
Yeah, no. Sorry. At his current age, I have not seen him play a role in something.
Right.
Yes, we have seen him definitely act for sure, and I like him a lot. But you know, I'm a huge Will Wheaton fan, so anytime he shows up, I'm happy. But yeah, that'd be really interesting. And then who would you want to play a Q? We're asking our own questions now. Who would you want to play a Q if not John Delancey? Because Corbin Burnson wasn't my first choice in that Next Generation episode.
Oh yeah.
I think that was Q Who. I don't remember. No one Q Who. It was. I get them all mixed up because they all have Q in the title.
Right.
I don't know. It would.
Oh gosh, that's a good question.
Who would I want to see as a Q? Now I got to think about that.
Yeah.
Who would make a good Q? I don't know. John Delancey. Actually, you know what? Rainn Wilson would have been great.
Yeah.
If he hadn't already played Harry Mudd, Rainn Wilson would be fantastic. I don't know. But yeah, it is interesting to think about how a Q could work into Discovery. Q has not worked very much outside of TNG. He showed up.
He did a lot. He showed up once or twice in DS9, but he was there a fair amount in Voyager.
He showed up once in Deep Space Nine. He was there more in Voyager. Yeah, there was an ongoing thing in Voyager, but I feel like that never worked quite as well as it did in Next Generation. And it might be that Q really belongs, although he did show up in Lower Decks. For the most part, Q might really belong to Next Generation and might not translate elsewhere.
I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool to see him in Picard.
Yes! Oh, that has to happen. Ooh.
That would be pretty cool.
Guinan's coming back this season.
What?
Oh, you didn't know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, sorry. It was a big, huge public thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. I completely missed it.
No, look up the clip on YouTube. Maybe we'll link it in the description. But
okay.
Patrick went on The View to promote the first season of Picard, and while he was there, invited Whoopi to come in for the second season to play Guinan on Picard. So Guinan's coming in.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that's exciting. I can't wait. That's the coolest thing about season 2, Picard. But yeah, so if Guinan's there, man, Q's got to be there to antagonize her.
Yeah. Oh, that would be perfect.
We got to have it.
And he's teased that he might be returning to something.
Oh, really? Well, no, that was probably, I think that was before he was on Lower Decks, though.
No, I think that was recently.
Oh, really?
I'll have to go look now.
I'll have to check and see. I'd love to see him come back anytime. As I said, I'm always happy to see John Delancey. So, I don't know. I don't put it past Discovery to be able to pull anything from Star Trek lore elsewhere and make it work in their context. I mean, they're so ingrained, they're so integrated with other Star Trek, maybe more than any other Star Trek series. They're really integrated with other series. They're constantly bringing in references. They're constantly bringing in threads from other series. And so who knows? It could very much be a case.
Yeah, this is from so we should just include this in the news segment. This is from 7 hours ago on CBR.com.
Oh.
John Delancey announces Q's return in cameo message. During a cameo message, John Delancey announced that he would be making a return to the Star Trek universe as the omnipotent Q.
Ooh, I bet it is going to be in Picard Season 2. I'll bet it is.
You're going to see more of me. Cheers, Merry Christmas, and let's just cross our fingers that 21 is going to be better. It's been better than 2020.
Yeah. That's cool. That's exciting. Let's see what happens. Awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Very cool.
Well, that's good. So,
all right. So, yeah, there
Tim,
we go.
You know what? We're running out of days when I can weeks that I can ask this question and get the same response. But Tim, what's going on next week?
Well, gosh, Kevin, I think next week we're going to be covering, is it the 12th episode of Discovery Season 3?
Wow.
And can I get any higher and see what else comes up?
What else comes up besides my pitch? Yeah, what a novel idea. We'll find out what that's all about next week. I'm excited about that. Are you excited about it? I hope you are. And
oh, you weren't asking me.
No, I don't know. Sure, I'm asking you. Let us know, too, what you're interested in happening when we don't have new Star Trek to discuss every week. Got any ideas? Let us know. We have ideas of our own. You'll find out when we get there. But in the meantime, please like, share, comment, rate, and subscribe. And also be sure to send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter or on Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to discuss your question on the show. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
I got nothing. It's 11:15. It's way past my bedtime.
Well, since it is, I'll let you off the hook just this once. All right. So I guess that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time.
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin Sinise. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.